got some pretty crucial figures that are coming out today, the GDP figures. Economists are predicting the GDP will fall sharply in the quarter. I mean, how bad is it going to get and how significant is it?
It's pretty significant, Pete. Look, we're expecting about 2.5% negative growth for the quarter, and that would be the second largest fall on record. So records for the Bureau of Statistics go back to 1959. The biggest fall ever was last year, the June quarter, where the economy fell by 7%. But if it falls by 2.5% today, and that's the expectation from economists, then it would be the second largest fall ever. Look, The big thing has been household consumption. So people were in lockdown in New South Wales and Victoria, and they weren't spending any money. Businesses were closed, particularly manufacturing sector, which contributes a lot to our economy. Also construction. We know the construction sector was on pause in Sydney and Melbourne over that time period. So there's a lot of things that are pushing economic growth down. But if we take a quick look at the quarterly expectations from the major banks, you can see there's a bit of variation there, but they're all thinking it's around that 2.5% to 3% fall in the quarter. But the good news is, if we look for the whole year to the end of the September quarter, it is still going to be a positive year for economic growth. The consensus is a lift of about 3%. So September quarter, it's obviously going to be a very tough quarter economically, and we'll get the figures in a short amount of time at 11:30.
Yeah, just for context here though, Ed, I mean, this was always going to be the bad one, right? And so you'd have to think that the next one, especially coming into Christmas, it's going to bounce back.
Absolutely. Look, we've just had the Black Friday sales, and a bit over $5 billion was spent by Aussies. They've been saving that money in the September quarter. They're now back out and about spending that money, particularly on the east coast of Australia. So the economists are expecting a big bounce back in the December quarter this year of about 4% growth, maybe a little bit higher, and then a big bounce back in the first quarter of next year before growth will start to normalise around June next year. But the recovery, we've talked about what shape it could be. Would it be a V shape, J shape? It's looking like it's going to be a W shape. So it's going to be a little bit up and down. We're going down today in the September quarter when the figures come out, and then it's going to be right back up again. So it's looking good.
Hopefully not down again after that. Now, meanwhile, Ed, tomorrow the home loans data for October is released. New home loans expected to jump?
New home loans are expected to jump. This is also from the Bureau of Statistics. It's their lending indicators information. It's pretty important data. They're expecting a rise of about 2% in new home loans being written during the month of October. But this is the interesting part. Owner-occupier loans, they're expected to be up 3%, but investor loans up about 6%. So it's a sign, the expectation is there are more investors starting to come back into the property market and buying up properties around the country again. So expect to see a sharp jump in investor loans. And Pete, the other news we're getting today from CoreLogic is the house price data for the month of October. And we know property prices are up about 21% this year, but they're starting to creep down. So for the month of October, we're expecting a 1% lift in property across the country, and expect to see that sort of slower growth over the next 12 months for property in the country.
Okay, well, I guess that was always going to come. Ed, thank you. Appreciate that. Good one. Ed Boyd, across all the details as usual. And if you stay here on Sky today, you'll be able to see the release of those GDP figures, which will reveal the impact of the Delta lockdowns on the Australians. So that's what Ed and I were just talking about. This was always going to be the bad one following the Delta lockdown. The next one will be much better, but that's all coming up at 11:30. And stay tuned here too on First Edition, because the Shadow Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, he'll be joining us in just a few moments.